Well, hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRC Plus. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition. Took a couple of weeks off, obviously with the holidays. Last time we talked, James Madison was, trying to get a playoff win in the college football playoffs. Obviously, they ended up falling in that game. Put up a fight against Oregon, give them credit for it. But now we're kind of back to our regular scheduled programming, doing some profiles, chatting with some folks from the Richmond community. And as you saw from the title of the show, and as you see here on the bottom of the screen, former Richmond guard DeLonnie Hunt joins the show, spent 2 years at Richmond as a captain, and then has since now started playing overseas in Croatia. Let's bring in DeLonnie. DeLonnie, thanks so much for joining into the show. How are things in Zagreb, the capital of Croatia?
First, well, thanks for having me. But things are great over here. Definitely being my first year pro. Wouldn't want it any other way. So I'm just glad to be able to be living out my dream over here and really getting used to the European world.
Yeah, absolutely. You're playing in the top level of Croatian basketball for Dynamo Zagreb, as you just informed me before the show started how to pronounce it. Have you ever spent time in Europe before you signed this contract?
No, I actually have not. This is my first time being in Europe, ever. So it's all new to me, but I'm about 5 months in now. So I kind of got a good feel for Croatia. Been to some other places, of course, in Croatia, and then playing in another league. We've been in, it's called ENBL. So we've been able to travel to Kosovo. It's another place that we've been to, but I can't think of off the top of my head. And then actually later this month on the 20th, we'll be going to Iceland. So that'll be another experience.
Yeah, that'll be really the best part about Europe is how easy it is to travel to another country. It's it's like
It's funny you say that though, because Iceland's gonna be a crazy trip. I'm hearing the closest airport to where we're going is about 4 hours away. So once we have a long flight, we got to get on a bus and then so that's gonna be. And Czech Republic is the other place, and then we'll also be going to Belgium.
Yeah, you're originally from the DMV area. Spent some time at Wagner. I'm sure you got used to this area, and then now you got to learn a whole new system of. I'm sure the basketball is a little different. I took a peek at the roster. Most of the guys are Croatian. What's it been like, communicating with this guy? Is there a language barrier where they only speak Croatian? Have you picked up on some words, or is it mostly English?
So most of my teammates speak English, so it's easy to communicate with them. But the coach, he also speaks English as well. So when he's communicating with me about one-on-one stuff, he'll talk to me in American or English. But if he's addressing the whole team, most times it is in Croatian, and I'll have one of my teammates next to me just translating basically what he's saying. So that's definitely the most different part I could say for being a pro in Europe, is having someone translate everything the coach just said. And then, so it's sometimes it's difficult because when the coach is he's in his motivational rants or sometimes getting after us in practice, it's kind of hard to understand the basis of what he's saying, because you can't have a teammate try to translate when he's in a heated moment. So but other than that, everything's been pretty transparent. Guys understand that I'm American and that I'm also a rookie, so they've been very helpful in that department.
We don't have to get too into the weeds of contract talks and this and that. But how did you end up in Croatia? I mean, that's an interesting landing spot. Obviously, there's a lot of different leagues when you go play overseas. You hear that term all the time. But there's a lot of different leagues in a lot of different countries, a lot of different teams, right? And it's a very popular thing for successful college players to make that decision to go overseas. How did you land in Croatia with Dynamo Zagreb?
I would have to say, it may sound cliche, but I would really have to say it was God. This summer was a really rough one for me. Well, actually dating back to last season. As for people out there that don't know, I was having a great breakout season and then got hurt early in the conference play and missed the rest of my senior year. And going into the summer, it was just all about preparation, getting ready, trying to become a pro. And then I got hit with the worst news of my life, is that my mom had gotten really sick, and eventually she had passed away. And it was about 2, 3 days after she had passed away, and I was in a room by myself. And like, going through this, it's like I had been to Vegas, I had been to California, trying to like work out with people, trying to get eyes out there, especially having film cut short for my last year. So, and it was just like, you're still not hearing any phone calls. I had one, my agent had told me that I had one look from Serbia, and that look didn't fall through. It was about 2 weeks ago past, and I haven't heard from the team again. And me just not knowing how the situation goes is just kind of, I wouldn't say a panic, but just like a kind of like a worry, like what's next? Do I just wait? Do I just like everything's gone cold? And like I said, I was in a room by myself. I was just crying, and because it was like it was so tough, and it wasn't even about basketball at that moment. It was literally about I just lost my best friend. I was literally by her side the whole way. I was literally in the room when she took her last breath. So, and then probably I want to say about 15 minutes after that, it was DeLonnie, you got your first contract that you can sign to Croatia. And it was like, I looked up and I was like, I guess that's you telling me stop crying, huh? So it was like kind of just probably one of the biggest smiles I had throughout that whole time, throughout probably a 4 or 5 week period. So like I said, I would have to just point to God in that circumstance, because like literally that was probably the lowest I've ever been, like ever been mentally, how I ever felt with family, like just like it's hard to explain, because just I don't know how to really explain losing a parent, you know what I mean? And then so it hit really hard, but to also have that blessing of my dream coming true, it was also really like heartwarming. So I would just have to point to God.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to imagine that, you go through something traumatic like that, and then you also now have to completely, change every style of your life, going overseas and then being in Europe. And, I would imagine you don't have many friends or family in Europe. And so to kind of, be out there solo can't be easy. I'm sure that's been really difficult for you. Who have you been able to, talk to and rely on to kind of get you through some of those, lonely nights, being in a new country with not many familiar faces around?
Well, definitely leaning on my grandmother is the most, just also realizing how short and how life can come at you so fast. It's definitely important to continue to talk to her as much as I can. Being in contact with my friends, my brothers, is also great as well, because it's like as we're all going through it, maybe even if it's in different ways, though they're always gonna keep you laughing, and sometimes you just need that. It's like you go through a long day and then you come back home and it's like you just realize like I'm still on the other side of the country. I'm still so far. It's like even when coordinating this meeting, it was like 4 or 5 probably at work, but as we're saying, it's 10 over here and it's 4 where you guys are. So it's like it's hard. I'm trying to coordinate around that basis as well. But also like I said, leaning on God has been most important for me as well, because I'm literally going through a situation where it's like my worst dream and my biggest dream came true all in one. So it's like it's kind of just like recognizing that, like, even though I feel like the world is caving in, I'm going through some unimaginable pain. I'm still blessed, and the way to stay grounded with that is to continue to pray to God, and then also ask for the strength from my mom that's right next to him. So, but that's probably the best way I can, because I'd be lying if I said it was easy. I would be lying if I said it was easy. Sometimes it's the worst nights, and sometimes I don't even know what to do with myself. But God keeping me grounded, along with my grandmother and my support system, is definitely helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that with us. One thing that is universal and maybe makes you feel at home is basketball. And what's the basketball been like? Have you experienced a different style that, a lot of times we hear about the European game's a little different than the American game? And what's that transition been like? And how has it been able to rely on basketball to kind of be your rock and a hard place?
Yeah. So it's actually funny because I did an article for one of the my agencies that I'm a part of, which is Zito Partners, and they kind of asked me like how was it adapting, and I said I actually shouted out Richmond because and Coach Mooney because it's like, American or the NBA, it's a lot of threes getting up, pick and roll and ISO. Whereas I feel like Richmond kind of prepared me for European basketball because it doesn't rely so much on dribbling and, it's more so thinking the game. That's what I said. So I would think that was probably the biggest difference is you really think the game here, like in America, you probably think getting 2 fouls in the first quarter is bad. But in Europe, if you don't use that second foul to stop a fast break, you might be in trouble for it. You know what I mean? So it's like stuff like that where it's like every time it doesn't matter if it's a small forward or a power forward. If they have a switch on a younger guy or a smaller guy, they're gonna try to post you. They're gonna try to create advantage from that way. So it's definitely thinking the game a little bit more in Europe. But don't get me wrong, the guys are still very skilled, very very skilled, very efficient. So they definitely have some similarities. But I would definitely say America kind of relies more on talent, whereas Europe is more relying on your IQ and your brain.
Absolutely. You mentioned Richmond a little bit. Obviously, folks from around here know you for your time at Richmond. Both years, kind of frustrating for you probably because you had such a great season your first year after you transferred from Wagner, but you missed some time with the wrist injury. And then your senior year, as you mentioned, I mean, you were unbelievable. 4 25-point games, 15.8 points a game, captain both years. And then you had I think a foot injury in your last year with Richmond. Have you stayed in touch with any of the players from this year? Have you talked with Coach Mooney through this process of going overseas and just trying to continue this basketball journey as it seems to be going in the right direction, especially because your numbers in Europe are pretty good as well?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the little guy that wears my number. I feel like I owe him something to stay in contact with him. So, and he texts me after games, even when just to ask me for little advice. But of course, just one thing, like I said, when I was going through this situation, one thing that I did was go to Richmond and work a camp. To kind of just like use basketball as a muse and like kind of keep my mind off of other things. And I was still around most of the guys that are part of the new team. So, and then also, like you said, being hurt, it was good to be around those guys so I could actually start playing again and getting ready for the overseas transition. So, that helped me build a bond with new guys and then even a stronger bond with the guys that were already there that I've played with. So I definitely keep in contact. Even the smallest, I'm like, hey, stop missing free throws. That's still me. I'm still going to be me. So I definitely still keep in contact. And then even with Coach Mooney, I remember just not even too long ago, I want to say right before Christmas, he texted me a text, say, thinking about me and he loved me and happy holidays. And I text him right back and tell him I love him more. So definitely, still, it's not. Whereas I'm texting him every single day, but I've texted someone from that coaching staff at least every month, and then I've also like literally everyone. I've texted everyone, and even some of the players I'm still keeping in contact with. Just Richmond's become my roots, and like I said, I'll be a Spider forever. So just keeping in touch with my roots is also a good way to help me cope with being in Europe by myself.
Yeah, 2 years at Richmond. You think back to that 23-24 special season for the Spiders. That a little disappointing into the year that y'all didn't get the at-large bid to the NCAA tournament, but a lot of good memories over those 2 years. Do you have a favorite memory or time with during your time in Richmond?
Favorite memory? It's a lot, man. I would say that Dayton game is definitely forever stamped in my mind. That VCU game at Richmond, oh, yeah, for sure one, and then even the St. Joe's game. I'll probably have to say one of my best memories, and of course, it may sound weird, but we were on the road at Rhode Island, and our plane was having troubles, so we were stuck in the airport, and it was probably about 3-4 hours, and then we finally ended up getting on the train. I mean, getting on the plane and going back home. And by the time we got back home, it was probably about 3-4 in the morning. And then at that time, I still had like a 9 a.m. class, and I went to class, and then we also had practice that day too. So it was like, it was funny because usually, you're a little grumpy, you're a little mad that you gotta be around the team again. Like, I just saw you guys, we just were in the locker room together, and then we're boom right back, and then it was still about business. It was still about, okay, got a little adversity, but now it's time to keep pushing. So that'll probably be one of my, aside from winning games, just teammate situation, because like that was a great night, even though because it was like, and I think what made it better is we was coming off a win. You stuck in the airport, you feel like, oh, everything's going wrong, we just lost, but it's like, nah, man, at least we're safe, we're all together, and once the plane's up and ready, we'll be back home to Richmond. And so that's probably one of my favorite moments that a lot of people don't know about except people on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. What about playing for Coach Mooney? Obviously he's been at Richmond for a long time now. I think he's like the 6th longest tenured head coach in all of college basketball, or at least Division I, or around that number. What makes it special playing for Coach Mooney? Because he does such a good job of, it seems like, reacting to or molding the season around the roster that he has, because the success that the Spiders have had over the years have been in a lot of different ways.
I think just the type of guy that Coach Mooney is. I think King and I kind of touched on this a lot when we first got to campus. It was just like how much it felt like home, and the same thing that he used to recruit us was the same thing that we went by as we were there, if that makes sense. Just really being. He says he loves to recruit competitive guys, and he loves to recruit good people. And I feel like that kind of goes away with basketball guys. So I'm a firm believer in the basketball guys. You can't cheat the game and expect to have the best out of it. Whereas like if you have great people, if you have great young men, you're going to get the best out of them. And whether it's wins and losses, you're going to find ways to benefit them because you have good people at the end of the day. And I think he's just a phenomenal coach because, usually a coach would be like, all right, I've done it this way for so long. Maybe I have to start adapting with the new timeline or the new portal. But the best thing about him is he's going to stay true to himself. And of course, he may change things up, but he's going to do what's had him in success in so many ways for so long. And I think that's exactly what he's doing. It's like even this year watching it is he's been doing a long rotation where it's a lot of guys getting reps, and it's quick. Like within the first 2 minutes, you see 2 or 3 people at the scores table, and it's just like, okay, we haven't seen this before, but when they get out there, they're still running the Princeton offense. You know what I mean? So it's just, even though if he changes a little thing, he's going to stick to what he knows at heart, and I think that's the best thing.
So when you came into college basketball, it was the COVID season, 2021 at Wagner, and then a couple of years later, the portal became what it is kind of today, and you decided to transfer to Richmond, and then over the last couple of seasons, we've seen these schools commit a lot more money to paying players, which is now a thing. What was it like being a part of this when you were coming out of high school? Getting paid was kind of out of the question back in 2019. They weren't really talking about athletes getting the amount of money that they're getting now. And then, maybe your last season, you started to see, a little bit of money in the bank account for playing college basketball, which was new.
It's definitely, it's rewarding, and it's a good thing for players that understand what the money is for. It's not about looking flashy. Of course, that's a part of it. You want to be able to have some money in your pocket to be able to, buy some nice things. But like coming into college, it was just about being hungry. I honestly felt like that I was under recruited in high school. And then COVID hit. I actually have a story about how I went to a high school where it was a competitive high school, but it wasn't like in the area we have the WCAC, which is like one of the highest conferences in high school basketball across the country. And I wasn't a part of that, but I had a schedule where we had teams like that on the schedule. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the year, we had ended up winning the Maryland State tournament, which also had a couple of WCAC teams in there. And we ultimately beat a team named Bullis. which is an IAC school.
Yep.
And then Bishop Walsh, which is also like a highly touted school. I don't know if they're still up and running today, but they were when I was still in high school, which is crazy because how time flies, man. But so just going on to say that after that, our season had got cut short and we had 2 more tournaments left. So and then one of those tournaments was against the Gonzagas and all the Sixes, St. John's, the Mathis. It was, and I was so excited because it was like everyone thinks that tournament just marks the end of the year, but it's actually people that watch that type of tournament. So I was kind of devastated that we weren't gonna be able to play in that. And like the same thing that happened after I got out of college. It was like everything just flatlined, and it was like, okay, my recruitment is dead. But Wagner was a school that they recruited me and they stayed in touch, like every day. Like, yo, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And I was like, man. And it was like, to be honest, at first I didn't want to go there because I thought I was hired there. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I also, once I chose there, it was like, okay, we're kind of not at the bottom. We have a chance. We're still playing Division I, but it's like it's time to show why you felt like you were better than you were. You know, and from there it was just about hunger, and then from also going into college, it was also about I want to play pro, you know, and that was kind of the reason for my move. It was like I feel like I hit my ceiling at Wagner, and I wanted to go somewhere that was going to prepare me for a better opportunity to get to the pro level. And when I sat down with Coach Mooney, you know, by that time, NIL is a factor, NIL is this, NIL is that. But I told him before we negotiated any numbers, I said, Coach, like, all of this is a bonus. Like, my main focus is I want to play after college. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think from the moment I told him that, I think that's when he really understood the type of young man I was and understood that what he was going to get out of me for this basketball thing. It wasn't going to be, you missed a check, I'm not playing. You missed a check, I'm not practicing. It wasn't. At that point, he realized that our negotiation wasn't going to be transactional. It was going to be genuine. And I think that's the hunger for the game and just the respect for the game is actually what carried me to that.
Yeah, well, clearly your goal worked because now you're playing overseas in Croatia. Your first season, things are going well. What's the goal? What's next? What's kind of your mindset now that I think you're like 18 games into this your first season pro?
It's hard to kind of really answer that question because, like, one thing I am learning about being overseas is, like, you got to stay where your feet are, you know? So if I start thinking about next summer, then I'm already ahead of myself, you know? So I kind of just got to think about tomorrow, you know, which is we got practice again, and then we got a game Saturday. So and we're actually kind of like, while my numbers may be good, we're actually kind of in a rough patch where we've been losing the teams we should be beating. We haven't been playing as well as a team as we were earlier in the year. So it's like, that's kind of where my mind is now. It's kind of trying to play better. But of course, future, you definitely want to get up a higher level. You definitely want to get paid more. You definitely want the recognition. You definitely want to play in those gyms you see on Instagram and stuff that in Europe and those crazy environments. But to be honest with you, I couldn't speak that far, you know. And I think another thing that's kind of let me put that into perspective is this past summer. And like I said, connecting with God even more is just staying where my feet is and staying grounded. So that's probably my answer I have for you there.
Perfect. Well, DeLonnie, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. Enjoy the rest of the season. Enjoy the trip to Iceland. Be sure to take some pictures and stuff.
For sure. I definitely will, for sure.
Perfect. All right, thanks, DeLonnie. Thanks so much, and good luck for the rest of the year.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yep, my pleasure. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.